Welcome to Watch DSN, DSN's series of interviews with retail pharmacy leaders that are transforming their retail pharmacies into healthcare delivery destinations. I'm John Kenlon, Senior Vice President at EnsembleIQ and publisher of Drugstore News. Today, we're pleased to have with us Bill Ladwig, Senior Vice President, Professional Services at Lewis Drugs. Headquartered in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and around since 1942, Lewis has 59 stores across South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota, and serves the unique needs of many different shoppers and patients. They say you can't be all things to all people, but in Lewis Drugs' case, you can, and in many instances, you have to be. Lewis is also a responsible citizen of the communities in which it does business. Programs like Toys for Tots, support for the Salvation Army, Santa for Seniors, and Volunteers of America Spirit Tree are just a few of the ways that Lewis gives back. So let's get started. Are you ready, Bill?
I am.
Excellent. Okay, first question. Retail and access to healthcare can be more spread out in South Dakota than in other places. So Lewis Drugs has to be a lot of things to a lot of people. Talk about some of the creative strategies you have in place to serve the unique needs of your customers, and talk a little bit about the patient innovations Lewis Drugs has implemented recently.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the insightful introduction to on the 80-year legacy. And I'm very fortunate working for a company. I've worked for Lewis now for starting my 43rd year, and I was blessed to be able to. Mark Griffin hired me, and I've been here for my entire pharmacy career, and it's an absolute total blessing. But the reason we're still here and we're successful is because we've been very attuned to what's happening in our communities. So with the loss of the Shopko, Kmart's, Pamida stores, it's put our rural areas in a little bit of distress with pharmacy services. So we had to react, and we've been one of the fastest growing pharmacy chains in the nation in the past decade. So we've had to expand our coverage. And with that, we've had to build brand new pharmacies in a lot of these communities where we're the only pharmacy in the entire county. So they call them pharmacy deserts. I like to call them critical area access pharmacies because they serve a great purpose. Oftentimes we are the forefront leader process with the healthcare. And as all of us know, the most important aspect of any kind of healthcare is the patient. All of your activities need to be patient-centric and patient education. And we found now with COVID and other things that this put a forefront on getting patients comfortable with their healthcare, educated. So we've done a lot of things. We've done a lot of things involving our Smart Sync, our Smart Pack, immunizations. So there's been quite a variety of things. But again, we don't have the assets to create a wave. We can look for the current, and then the smart way is to figure out how to navigate the current to be successful.
I like that. Critical area access pharmacies, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
I like that. It sounds very important and something I think that maybe our industry might start to utilize. I think it defines the need better.
I wish they would, because the problem we're going to face is that you're seeing an increasing pressure on pharmacy margins. In a lot of these communities, the pharmacy represents the healthcare component. And so with that, trying to impress on providers, on payers, oftentimes you don't realize the value of what you had. And we were just talking about this earlier, is that you don't really realize that what you had until you lose it. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, similarities are shocking. So all those things that you've taken for granted, and I think the accessibility of a pharmacy is paramount in that. And I think that's something that I would like people to be impressed on, is the value that exists, that relation that exists, because we need to make sure that we continue to foster that, we grow that, we're responsive to it. Because, if anything, what we've learned through all this is that you have to be responsive, you have to be evolving, because if you are not evolving, you will be evolved.
And I guess just a brief follow-up. That requires that your pharmacists are able to practice to the top of their license. Is that something you've been able to make happen?
Well, we're taking a step further with that too, is that, everybody's always an advocate for getting pharmacists to be providers. And I think the evolutionary piece of all that is not to be focused on the profession of pharmacy, but the focus should be on the patient. So if you can show the value of what the pharmacist provides to the patient and to outcomes, then the obvious decision will be, yes, we need to do this. So what we're working on right now is we're working on embedding pharmacists into clinics, especially in the rural areas. And by doing the embedded pharmacist, you're able to show that. And it's a shared cost. Mark realizes that, this is an evolutionary process and we need to be innovative. So with that, we're willing to dedicate our pharmacists inside the clinic, working with patients, triaging patients, getting access. And then because the amazing thing I've learned through my 43 years now of being at Lewis is the fact that there are incredible silos that have been established in the healthcare industry. And unfortunately, a lot of those are impediment to the patient access and the patient education. And I think what we're going to try to do here is attempt to see if we can find a way of simplifying these processes. So by embedding the pharmacist, and we're doing it actually in urban clinics first with Stanford, which is our partner, we've been able to do some incredibly impactful processes. We've been able to access the EHR. We've been able to eliminate a lot of the coverage concerns. We've been actually to have a pharmacist then, because my epiphany, because everybody has an epiphany, and my sentinel moment was when I was with one of these physician meetings and we're having a conversation, and Stanford and Lewis have built clinics and pharmacies that co-adjoin, shared door, et cetera. We've been doing it for many years. And with that conversation, I was talking to one of the lead physicians and he said, I see your lead pharmacist, Justin, every day. I say, Justin, how you doing? How are the kids? She said, never once did we ever talk about a patient. And I went, wow, that's on me. So that's where I got the idea of this embedded pharmacist position. It's been incredible. So what we're seeing is an uptake, an empowerment. And what's actually occurring is the fact that we're now having conversations about patients and how do we simplify this and how do we eliminate all the phone calls and how do we stop all the email lost emails, and how do we make sure, because the most important time to ask a patient's question is when they're asking, not getting back to them. And so what we found is that if we can find a way of directing that, so by embedding the pharmacist, what we're able to do is create an avenue where we have now a lightning rod from our retail pharmacies into our embedded pharmacists, and a reciprocal process from the embedded pharmacists and the practitioners into the pharmacies, because we're there, we have more contact, pharmacies do, with the patients than anybody. But how do you make sure that that contact is truly impacted? So this came out of a conversation that we had quite a while ago about I call it the triage triangle. Because if you look at a triangle, and in the triage triangle, you've got the payer at the top of the triangle, and they've got their nurses, they're assisting with adherence, everything else. In the one corner, you've got the clinic with the practitioners and the case managers and the social workers. In the other corner, you've got the pharmacy that's providing the pharmaceutical services, the MT, everything else. In the middle of that is the patient. The problem is that all the energy and focus is on toward the center and no dialogue concerning the perimeter of the triangle. So what I'd love to see in this world is where we're actually having dialogue. In the vertically integrated healthcare system, it's already been done. You see that. The problem that we're having with the siloed approach is that it's a turf war and everybody's trying to fight through it. But if you can show, and that's what we've been successful in doing, you can show that it's easier for everybody. It's a true win-win-win. Same way that SmartSync is, because you decrease your calls to the clinic, the receptionist, you decrease the nurse change time, you decrease the pharmacist on call percent. You can do them when it's easier. Same thing flows with everything else. So we've got incredible anecdotal responses to patients interacting now with pharmacists. And it's just one of those things, it's good to see. Every pharmacist wants to make a difference. It's kind of played in with the whole COVID piece now, because we have a lot of our pharmacists who we're giving tens of thousands of immunizations. Even though this has been an incredibly stressful year, we have people who volunteer every day to give immunizations. And that's a very credible, plottable, and heartwarming to see that even though people are tired, working long days, masks on, work environments, but because of that incredible rewarding experience of having someone thank you personally, it truly justifies the means.
I think that's great. I think it's a real common sense approach to delivering care. I like that you called it the triage triangle. Team approach, I'm sure it improves compliance, ease of use, it's convenient. I'm sure the payers appreciate it because those outcomes are better. You'll eventually, I think, drive down costs. So it's very smart. You just alluded to a little bit to COVID, and of course, the last 14 months we've been consumed by it. Can you talk a little bit more about how COVID has impacted how you guys go to market?
Well, what we've been trying to accomplish is that to create a safe environment. What was really surprising to me is when we did our first feedback questionnaire is that we were shocked to find out that we had so many of our patients using our drive-through services. So they would go into the store, buy something, but because it's the pharmacy and it's involved with illness, that they would go through the drive-through and come in instead of coming to the register. So epiphany again. So we, went through all of everybody else had done, the plexiglass, the reassurance, but we've really seen a positive response in sales. And again, the other part of this that's really hold true is the fact that we've seen very much a tie to the local community. We have large stores in our urban areas that have a lot of garden shop, greeneries, et cetera, a lot of supplies, and our sales have been very positive. So even though there was no flu season at all, overall it's been a very positive response. And so what it's taught us is the fact that I think our consumer, our patients realize the value of local. They realize the value we care, and we're seeing that by increased frequency in shopping. So it's nice to see because everybody has a package delivered to their front step now, but yet our local trips are still there, they're growing, and it's a very positive reinforcement to see.
Yeah, and I think this is the new normal, so we're gonna have to get used to it. So it's good that you've come up with solutions. So one last question. Retail pharmacy continues to establish itself as a healthcare provider. Testing, vaccinating, chronic care, MTM, acute care at some stores. How do you see retail pharmacy evolving, let's say in the next 5 years? And what do you think some of the big chains could learn? Not you want to tip off your competitors too much, but what could a bigger national chain learn from somebody like Lewis without giving away any secrets here?
I think you just need to be attuned to your environment. You need to know what your opportunities are. And I think that's just knowing your patients, work with practitioners, make sure that you're aware of what the needs are. One of the biggest problems we've seen so far is the fear factor. Not only that, but it's the fall off in physicians' appointments. It's the follow through. And I think if the focus can be, and plus the fact is that I think pharmacy is kind of taken for granted because we've been there. And historically, a lot of people don't know their pharmacist by name. And that's very unfortunate. But until you have a sentinel event, and once you have a sentinel event, whether it be your own, your spouse, your parents, all of a sudden you realize the value of the pharmacist. I think it's incumbent on us to get that knowledge out there ahead of time. And as terrible as COVID has been, I think the one redeeming factor from all of this is that it's created that environment now. And I can't tell you how many people have sent us compliments, calls, dropping off everything, about getting an immunization. And I think that's something that's kind of put the patient's focus on the value what pharmacists have. Because from day one, when you graduate from pharmacy school, you really want to help people. And that's kind of the driving factor in all of this. But getting people to slow down, to take time to ask questions. Because I tell my students is it doesn't really matter what you know. What really matters is what you can connotate to the patient. It's the patient that matters in all of this. And if you can find a vehicle that allows you to be a better communicator and the patient benefits, everybody wins. You've got a loyal patient who will go to the nth, fight all kinds of restrictions on payments, concerns, because they want to fight for you. Because we basically have two things of value. We have our data and we also have our brand name. But the biggest part of all this is your patient loyalty. Everything else can be purchased. But the biggest concern with all that is the patient loyalty factor. And it's on us to make sure we drive that home and to figure out how do we make sure that the patients fight for us, because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to.
That's great. All right, so I'll tell you what I heard. You've rediscovered and the shopper has rediscovered the value of pharmacy. Embedded pharmacists are delivering better care, getting better outcomes, driving down costs, making the whole process more efficient. You're creating a safe environment and you're emphasizing the value of local. And you've been able to pivot and pivot well when you needed to.
I think the biggest part of all this is that I don't think you want to pity the pharmacy. Pharmacy needs to innovate and create its own value. And that's on us. So we need to show to America that there's a value with a local presence, a local relationship, and the educational component, because we're tied to product and that will go away at something. I've been saying this for decades, but at some time with 3D printing, it's coming. And we just have to be patient educators, a conduit, and accessible, trusted, and to make sure that we maintain that relationship.
All right, thank you. Bill Ladwig, Senior Vice President, Professional Services at Lewis. Thanks for doing this. I hope you and your team are well, and thank you for what you do. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.